So get this, there is no such thing as a perfect project. Eventually, something is going to go sideways. In the previous video, we looked at open communication and having empathy for others. And now we're going to explore the importance of experimenting and learning from failure. Adopting an experimental mindset can have a dramatic impact on an organization's ability to learn from their data and turn that into meaningful policy, projects, and more. Organizations with strong data cultures don't make ad hoc decisions. They encourage an experimental mindset. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be designing formal experiments with statistical outcomes, though those are great. But it does mean that projects or problems should be framed in terms of hypotheses, which can be evaluated with data. Notably, this means an organization might choose to not do something based on data. If you recall the earlier case study about the Obama for America emails, in one example, they ran two different sets of A/B tests that actually convinced them to make their emails less visually appealing and have very basic text and links. They didn't expect it, but those uglier emails led to bigger donations. You see, as humans, we're intuitively afraid of failure. Our popular culture is filled with references to the value of success, winning, getting ahead, and organizations, both public and private, most assuredly don't want to fail their constituents, the community, customers, or shareholders. But healthy organizations understand that most people get up every morning and go to work intending to do a good job, to make the best decisions they can, given the information that they have on hand. And yet, we will make mistakes. And yes, projects will fail. There is often more useful information inside of failure than you might expect, though. This is often how people find out unexpected things about how their software, data analysis, and human systems work. I didn't know that's how that worked, is a common refrain in these situations. Being committed to learning from mistakes and failures takes dedication and discipline. And it sits on the bedrock of trust and open communication that we looked at earlier. If a culture of finger pointing and shaming individuals or teams for doing the wrong thing prevails, people will not bring issues to light for fear of punishment. Assuming, of course, that you're not dealing with intentional actions, don't punish people when something fails or doesn't go as planned. It demoralizes them and gets in the way of learning from the failure. The notion of blameless culture evolved from aviation and healthcare industries, where mistakes can indeed be fatal. Only when problems and failures can be openly and honestly explored do we learn enough to avoid making the same mistakes again. In technology and other industries, this is referred to as a postmortem or a retrospective. And the goal is to understand how a problem arose and how to avoid it in the future, versus simply finding someone to blame and punishing them. Let's dig into a case study on this. The city of New Orleans has what is known as a third service EMS department, which means their ambulance service is separate from the fire department. This gives the city a great deal more flexibility regarding where and when ambulances are stationed. The city undertook a project to try to find the most optimal locations to park ambulances while they were waiting for a call, with the goal of saving money and reducing time to respond to those emergency calls. The initial map they put together plotted the centroids of each census block. A centroid is essentially where the population is most dense. They created maps of each centroid and placed ambulances in those locations. Many of those centroid points ended up in residential neighborhoods. The city's director of performance and accountability, Oliver Wise, said this essentially ended up with ambulances being parked outside someone's grandmother's house, which was very disconcerting over time. From a purely data driven perspective, the locations they chose were very logical. But in the context of local neighborhoods, it didn't make any sense. So the city had to find a new approach. Now, Wise admits that the failure in that project was not consulting the community from the beginning. They restarted by talking to residents and getting their input. It's important to develop prototypes that you test with users or constituents, he says, and accept that some of those might fail. The value from this experimental mindset and approach is continuous improvement. When you acknowledge that you can't possibly know everything about a project up front, you are more likely to adjust to changes as they happen and learn from both positive and negative outcomes.